since we're going to be talking about nourishment today, I just want to invite all of us to take a moment to observe what's around us. Just take a look around your space. Notice, is the air warm or cold? Do you feel comfortable in the chair that you're sitting in? How does your skin feel in contact with your clothing? With the chair that you're on? What are you smelling? Is it appealing to you or not appealing to you? What are you tasting in your mouth? Have you recently drank something or ate something? Have you not brushed your teeth yet today like me and are noticing that? Thank goodness for no smell-o-vision. I was like, oh, I'll brush my teeth after my coffee. I have not yet finished my coffee. So notice what you're seeing. Notice what you're smelling. Notice what you're hearing. Like what extra sounds are in your environment right now. Perhaps your earphones are sheltering some of those sounds for you. Just notice all these avenues in which we have to take in and connect with our senses, our sight, our smell, our hearing, our touch, our feeling, just our knowing. That's part of our environment and how we're receiving that within our bodies. So then just take a nice breath of fresh air, or hopefully it's fresh. And notice that coming into our bodies. And just notice how that feels. Our hearts are beating. We have all the air that we need. And then just notice the inputs that we have coming in from all of our senses. Just kind of be a witness, be observant of that. Notice what your breath is doing. How are you breathing? Just be curious. How am I breathing right now? How does my skin feel in my clothes? Do my ears like what they hear? Do my eyes like what they see? Does my nose like what it smells? How am I nourished by these senses? And how much of that is my perception of what these senses are taking in? And just have an awareness that how we receive this nourishment is largely based on our perception. Something that smells good, like to me, my coffee smells good. To my husband, it stinks. So just noticing, like to me, a warm cup of coffee feels nourishing. To my husband, it feels like torture. So just having an awareness of how our perception through our senses filters what we're taking in, how we're receiving. Let's talk. How y'all doing?
Hold on. First, I need to Marie Kondo my desk.
Because you're visual? What are you noticing visually?
Everything.
I'm like, look at the beautiful rainbow that you have going on with your books.
I have a lot of great aesthetics behind me, which I love about the virtual, because I actually get to enjoy what's behind me. You know, like when it's behind you, you don't ever see it. But, you know, like in the visual, it helps. But my desk is a little bit like my brain, where it's like idea, 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 idea. And I'm like, oh, no wonder I feel so scattered when I sit at my desk. So thanks for that awareness check. That'll go to the weekend cleaning up plan.
And on another question, like another note, how does your environment feel nourishing to you? Like, obviously, you just became aware that the desk is not very
Mhm.
nourishing. Like, what would make that feel a semblance of nourishment within you? What would it look like?
I know my thought goes to immediately like just taking it all off. I don't know that that's functional because I use a lot of things. So maybe, yeah, just kind of looking at it and thinking, well, would maybe just a little order, taking away some things that are no longer serving me and making things that are accessible, like things that maybe I don't need like on the ready, like in a drawer, and then things that are like needed, actively just accessible. Like a
Mhm.
system. Just implementing the little system here.
How's everybody doing? It's so for our people that are listening and or watching, they don't know that we've had a couple weeks break.
Mhm.
I was moving from Oregon to California, where I'm at right now. And we also were in Mexico for a week, chartering on a catamaran, living a week as if. And so we took a couple weeks break. So it's been a little while since we've all actually checked in with each other, and we
Mhm.
agreed to talk about nourishment today. And I just wanted to note like how nourished I feel by being in this environment with all of you, because I know that I could just show up as my authentic self, however, whatever state that may be. Right now, it's a state with unbrushed teeth, a cat that's pacing behind me, going like, why aren't you paying attention to me? And because I needed privacy for this situation, um, I basically am locked in our little room with the cat because all of his world is in here, and my husband's locked out. Not that he couldn't join us, but I think he was like, yeah, no, go do you. So I feel very nourished being in this circle right now. So thank you all.
I always love our time. I'm like, my soul just craves it. I do think the space of like being received genuinely, authentically, not feeling like I need to show up in any way other than just being is such a beautiful space. Um, and
Yeah.
I just ate a healthy snack that feels delicious in my belly. So I'm like kind of recognizing that sense of nourishment too right now.
Brenda, you want to go or you want me to?
You can go. I'm just picking animal crackers out of my teeth because that's what I just nourished myself.
I had nuts, so crunchy, shelly, yeah, all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, the same, right? Like, just being able to be with, like, I sent you girls in the WhatsApp, like, I love you girls so much. My besties, my business wives, whatever you want to call it, all of it, right? Like, just being able to let it all hang out, for lack of a better word, and knowing that that's okay and that that's safe. And like really, I mean, I've always been a nature girl, but really leaning into the nature and just like embodying isn't the word, but like just being outside all the time feels so nourishing.
Is it being held by your environment or letting your environment hold you?
I don't know if I've ever thought of it like that. But yeah, like there's no place I would rather be than be outside. My first favorite is any body of water, of course, but just being on the hammock with the winds or sitting outside on the patio in the morning with the winds and the sun. Like Jason and I, Grayson was really tired. She hasn't been sleeping well. So she ended up sleeping till 10 yesterday morning. So he and I got to hang out, and we were sitting on the patio, and it's where the patio is, it's in the east. So we get the sun, and I'm like this, like the sun is shining on my face, and he comes out with a hat and sunglasses. And I'm like, I love it. And he's like, I do too, but I don't like not being able to see. And I'm like, I don't care. So sun, you know, like sun and wind and all the things. Yeah.
Warmth.
I feel you. And I know, Brenda, you had shared you all haven't had much sun lately. And I'm like, we hadn't either. Like, we're kind of coming out of a little bit of a rain. I feel like it's been like 6 weeks of rain. I know it hasn't been, but I was out today barefoot in the grass, and like, you just feel like the crispness of this, like all of our grass is like coming in real full, and it's cool. And it's like a little soggy still from all of the rain. And I didn't realize how much I enjoyed that because I was chasing my dogs when I was doing it. But Erin, like you just brought, I was like, oh, I'm so grateful that I had that chance to like go out and experience the earth today. Even though I
No
don't
pun
know
intended that,
like,
it's Earth Day.
Oh, I
Is
didn't
it really?
even know.
Yeah.
Didn't even
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to make extra efforts to.
I mean, every day is Earth Day, right? In my mind, but I guess it's a celebrated day today, or it's a on the calendar day.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So.
How about you, Brenda?
I am surrounded by fur babies, which always sings to my soul. Hadn't eaten yet today, and my stomach was growly, so I just grabbed a quick handful of animal crackers as I was in the house to come out here. We, like I said, haven't had much sun, so I've been really missing that, you know, more so than just the power aspect, because if people aren't aware, we are 95+% off grid out here. And there are things I like to do that I refuse to pay the electric company for. So I really, really get cranky when I want to do things and I don't have sun to power them. And so it's been that way. It was a horrible day job week this week. And really, what's the right word? The easy word to say is counting down to when that's not a daily obligation or even a couple of days a week obligation for me. And I feel like it's just more confirmation for me when I have those days. So I'm feeling, if nourished is the right word, nourished by my decision to take care of myself and to step away from that, and getting more affirmations on the regular that it is the right thing for me to do. So I'm feeling good, but I'm like feeling odd at the same time because the weather patterns. As much as Erin's loving it, it's like, yeah, I love to be outdoors and I love to do all the things, but when it's not sun shining, it just doesn't feel the same. And I miss it because we're used to having much more of it than we do right now. So feeling good.
And in my brain, you all live in the same place, but you don't.
No, no.
The whole time zone thing really like messes with my brain for real. Just to think like Erin and Brenda are in Hawaii time zone, and then Tanya, you're in Pacific, and then I'm in Eastern. I'm just like, we are really like in opposite ends of the day, you know? Really kind of wild.
Ours is just starting and yours is getting ready to wind down.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm at the end of my work day, technically.
And I'm smack dab in the middle. Yeah. I wanted to, we've talked a lot about gene keys and human design and exploring gates or keys, which oftentimes have very similar veins or themes to them between the gene keys and human design. But they also have different nuances in how they present. And because my intention, our intention is to be able to cast a wide net, to be able to bring in as many people that want to explore these different aspects, these different archetypes of life, I thought, how cool would it be just to talk about this a little bit more in general? And that's why we're talking about nourishment today. It is the tomorrow, I believe, Brenda, is it tomorrow? Starts the 27th key and or gate. Gate for human design, key for gene keys. And it is based in nourishment. This idea of how we receive nourishment. Of course, most of us, the first place that goes to is what food are we eating? But there's so much more that nourishes us, our environment, our spirit, our emotions, our relationships. And
ability to receive.
Yes, our ability to receive that nourishment, and how sometimes we sort of like bend and or fold ourselves over in an effort to either receive that nourishment or give that nourishment in a way that sometimes is maladaptive, like not in our best interest, because we're either overgiving, trying to present ourselves as having so much value. So we're over nourishing, which by respect, we're then undernourishing ourselves, or vice versa. Like, how are we starving ourselves? How are we hungry for nourishment? So I thought that might be fun to explore it from that aspect rather than specifically talking about keys or gates. So I'd like to invite each one of us to sort of maybe contemplate or together have a discussion about, what do you know or what are you aware of that nourishes you, and how have you perhaps become aware of some maladaptive patterns? When I say maladaptive, I don't mean like we're doing it wrong, but survival is always the number one thing that we have been coming from. And so we've adapted and bended ourselves to be able to allow ourselves to receive nourishment. And how does that show up in like normal day-to-day life?
Where you said, Tanya, how do we get nourished and then how have we not? But like, I would like to flip it and be like, how have we, because I think for so many of us, we start with non-nourishment and then we have that contrast and then we start to nourish, you know?
Very true.
It's almost easier to identify the lack of nourishment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I think we can all identify, because we're all on different paths or where we are. And I think everyone can identify, connect to how we don't nourish ourselves. And then like, what are we working towards, or what do we, like, I think for a lot of us, it's easy to not nourish ourselves. Programming, parenting, societal, like all of the things. So I think for me, non-nourishing was not putting my needs, if we're talking about like what I want, that was I know Tanya's talked about this before, but like I kind of grew up with like, I'm okay, you're not okay. So I've met everyone else's needs or made sure everyone else was okay. And I would figure it out, or I would be an afterthought. I would put myself as an afterthought. And almost like being strong to these are where I need help with my words. Like fault comes into mind. It's not like it's your fault, but like detriment. To the point of like, just completely not having any thought for myself. And that might look like pushing myself too hard, whether it be working or not taking time for myself, or even someone's upset. And so they're upset, then I need to make them okay. And I'm the one that gets to be not okay. And for me, what it would bring up is like resentful. How come everyone else gets to be okay, or what
Taken
they
care of.
want taken care of? Yeah, that's a good one, right? Everyone else gets to be taken care of, but I
When's
don't.
it
But
my
obviously,
turn?
when's it my turn? Yeah, when's it my turn, right?
Mhm.
But all along, obviously, right? And when I say we're doing it to ourselves, I don't mean like we're the ones to blame, but we are in control and we can choose. It's just getting familiar with, sometimes people get to be disappointed or get to be upset even when we get to do what we want or nourish ourselves, or, and it's not a win-lose, right? But and so I think for me, it's like resting and allowing that space. I think I miss not misjudged, but I didn't give value for downtime, for rest. My mom used to always say, like, I would take naps, like even when the kids weren't taking naps, I was still taking naps. And somewhere along the way, I stopped taking naps, but I love a good nap and just quiet time. And I think I go back to societal, right? Like, that's lazy to rest. It's lazy,
Not
society teaches
productive.
us it's not productive.
So
I don't know what
crazy.
book I was reading, but they were talking about like all of the well-known, they brought up like inventors and presidents and CEOs of companies. It's like they all rest, they all take naps, they all have weeks off of work and pondering time. And but I think as a society, we're just like, you've got to be doing something. So nourishing is, and I think play, right? Like nourishment for me is also like, when I say doing what I want, it's like playing, because I don't think I did that a whole lot as a kid.
What would you say to somebody who's like, oh, well, that's great for you that you have time to play?
Yeah. Yeah. Now I do. But I remember distinctly when I used to work for my dad, I was in the shower, Jason and I were both getting ready. And I remember saying, how does everybody else get to go to lunch? I can't, I eat at my desk. And at the time, it felt like I didn't have 30 minutes for myself, right? And I remember being like, I would kill to go on a walk every day around the neighborhood. I mean, I remember just from the time I woke up to the time that I went to bed, every single minute was accounted for. Talk about nourishing, so much so that I wouldn't go pee sometimes.
I'm like having that same conversation in my head right now with you. I'm like, peeing, critical.
But I wouldn't, right? Like,
I know.
talk about not
I'm guilty
honoring
of it.
our bodies. So it's great for me. It doesn't happen. I didn't jump from not eating lunch and not walking around the block to playing, right? But what it did look like was, okay, I am going to take 30 minutes, because here's the other thing. I had to let go of control. I had to be okay with people doing things not my way, messing things up, and then having to fix it, right? Not me taking it on, but someone else, right? So me getting to the point of, and how it showed up for me was me getting sick, which I consider myself a healthy person. But when I was getting bronchitis a lot, when I was getting, and here we go back to nourishing. So if I had bronchitis, I wouldn't stay in bed. I would just continue to work and just not talk, or, I would just power through it. So it took to the point of, I don't want to live like this anymore. Like, I think this is why it's so, sometimes we don't necessarily know what we want, but we do know what we don't want. And so we can at least move away from what we don't want until we can figure out what we do want. And it was just like, I'm not answering my phone while I eat lunch, and I am going to sit and I'm going to take 30 minutes. And it's like those incremental shifts. I think I think I did, right? Like you like start here and then you just magically jump to here. It's like, no, it's just these little incremental steps, right? It's in the mundane, it's in the like not so sexy, fun stuff, right? That real change happens. And so I remember being like, and my sister used to work with me. She'd come up to my house and I was like, we're taking 30 minutes. We're not answering a phone call. We're just going to sit and we're going to eat. Murphy, stop. And we're going to just enjoy our lunch. And then
when you first did that though, didn't you fight such resistance inside?
Yes.
I was just going to ask how you felt those first few times that you were like, yep, this is what we're doing.
It's an addiction, right? Like checking your phone or like even before, like, okay, we're going to lunch. Do you need anything or whatever it might be, right? Like this is, which I think workaholism would be an awesome topic to talk about, because and I've always said this, but if I was an alcoholic, someone would have said, hey, we need to check on Erin because she's just drinking too much. But nobody ever says, let's check on someone who works too much. It's praised.
They praise you.
Yeah. And
For
it goes so much into our, does too much just in general, right? Whatever, right? Like we thrive. It's our identity. That's how we feel worthy. And so, like it wasn't very comfortable for a long time. And I don't think it ever, I mean, I know Tanya says like new level, same devil, right? It is always uncomfortable. It's just how long do I stay there or spin in that narrative, right? My brain still offers up some not so nice things, but now it's like, oh, here we are. This is where we're going again.
I just had this conversation with my sister yesterday. And of course, I'm listening to a podcast talking about Enneagrams and the achiever, and recognizing how much I personally and my sister, we both kind of share this trait, but like achievement is worth. And to think about offering the opportunity to even like rewrite that story, right? And what is the value? Who do I be without all of the accolades and by accolades, I don't even mean like achievement. It's just like my to-do
I did all the
list.
things today.
Yeah.
I finished my to-do list. Yeah.
And I remember personally like trying to implement or be in a practice of sitting and just, well, I think I had to actively read a book first to like convince myself that sitting was worthy. And now to think that I just actively will sit and like observe the nature or sit and pet my puppy, or just like sit with my stillness is such growth. But I also witnessed that I still am addicted to this calendar that's like, crammed, packed full of the day. Something that you just said made me think about the fact that you said today's Earth Day. And I'm like thinking about how we know that we have to nourish the soil in order to produce fruit, right? Like in order for it to produce valuable things, plants, trees, flowers, right? We have to nourish it. We have to tend to it. And Tanya, I think that you always like say like nature teaches us everything. And I'm like, oh, what a beautiful like visual of how like maybe there's even like dormant season.
Well, I was gonna say, what is winter, right? Like we have, not only do we tend to soil and things and take care of the earth, but nature goes dormant.
Yeah. Like it has its built-in rest time.
Yep. And also just notice, like an even more intricate piece of this is that nature doesn't necessarily need us to nurture it, for the apple tree to grow,
Mhm.
it needs us not to interfere.
Yeah.
And to recognize that it does have its cycles. Like if it goes dormant, it's because it needs its rest.
Mhm.
And we have all these thoughts or rules about how we think it should be. But if we allow ourselves to just step back and observe, we'll notice that nature takes care of itself.
Mhm.
Nature knows how to nourish itself. And we can either be a participating part of that, or we can be trying to control it by either interfering or forcing our things upon, right? Forcing our thoughts or beliefs upon nature, which eventually that never ever wins, right?
Right.
Brenda, what are you?
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask Brenda what she's noticing with her transition from work, trying to find that first step of, like, we're very clear about what we don't want, but we're not necessarily aware of what choices or possibilities that we have until we start, like, once that what I don't want sort of reaches critical mass and has pushed us hard enough, then we're like, I don't want this anymore, is usually that time when the trigger of asking like what it is that I do want, and that awareness starts to come up to even present you with choices. Like before that, we don't even realize we have choices. We're just like, don't want it, don't want it, don't want it, but we don't see choices. So I'm just curious what you're starting to notice as choices in this awareness that you've been having, like, I don't want this anymore, come up.
I think my biggest thing I'm looking forward to, if that's the right way to phrase it, is not living by a clock. I mean, I have no problem making appointments and meeting appointments and all that, but well, I live in Hawaii, but I've never switched to the Hawaiian time zone. I always continue to live my life Pacific, which was where I had moved from 8 years ago. So for 8 years, I've been ignoring the natural rhythms of life as they exist. I get up in the middle of the night. I'm at the desk at 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's great when I'm done by, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if all I'm putting in is an 8-hour day. But then and it's wonderful to have that long afternoon, but I'm already starting to think about 3, 4 o'clock. Oh, it's time to start winding down to get ready for bed. And that's not the normal, that's not the circadian rhythm of life here based on where we are on the planet. So what I'm looking forward to most, and I think will be nourishing to myself, is not abiding by that clock. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't still be an early riser, because I've happened to have been an early riser my entire life, but not going, oh God, I got to wind down and go to bed, or force myself to go to bed when the body's not ready to go to bed, knowing that the next morning is coming way too soon, or the middle of the night is coming way too soon, for lack of a better term. So that for me is like the first awareness of I can finally live in my time zone, which sounds like something small, but it's not. It's really not.
It's huge. Because what I hear you saying, and please correct me if I'm not reflecting this back to you, what I hear you saying is I'm looking forward to being able to be present with where I'm at.
Yeah, if I got something going on and I choose to want to stay out in my glass shop till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's what's inspiring me and motivating me at that time, and I have the energy for it, and I'm, not in danger of harming myself, that's what I want to be able to do. I don't want to say, oh, it's 6 o'clock, we gotta go do this, gotta go do this, so that we can be in bed by 7:30 and hopefully falling asleep by 8:30, 9 o'clock. That's like false. It feels like you've been living I don't know if falsehood is the right word, but you've been living a different life that's not your own.
You know what it brings up? It's like, this goes back to, at least for me, it was like, we're parenting ourselves in not the best way, right? Like that, you know what I mean? Like my mom used to be like, you have to go to bed this time. I'm like, but I don't want to. I want to finish the rest of the show. It's like, but you need to go to bed and you need to wake up at this time too. It's like,
right.
And also
there's
like
certain things we have to, right?
Like there's
there's certain
science
things
that shows like your brain wakes with the sun and goes down with the sun, right? Like that's what creates your circadian rhythm. And what I'm hearing, I'm like, do you go to sleep with the lights, with the sun out, and then you wake up with the sun down?
Around here, we have pretty much stable. We don't get the seasonal swings in light and dark like most people experience because we're closer to the equator. We have, I think our swing varies by an hour. So either we're dark at 6 or we're dark at 7:30. So it doesn't go to light at 10 o'clock at night in the summertime, that kind of thing.
Got it.
And we're pretty stable all year round. So I'm always getting up when it's dark, period. 5 o'clock in the morning is always dark. And 7:30, 8 o'clock at night is always dark. So it's not that much. Yeah, it's not that much forced, but it's never felt right, but it's been a conscious sacrifice, right? Because in order to keep the employment and the decisions and choices we've made to be able to live here, we agreed to abide by Pacific time for employer. And so not having that restriction, now my husband still will be living on that, and I will probably not shift far from it, but to not have to not be required to be able to say, okay, go have a good day and go back to sleep if that's what my body says it wants and needs. So like the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is sleep on my terms. And if that includes, right now I feel like I can't take a nap in the middle of the day, even though my body is screaming for one, because if I sleep during the day, then I can't go to sleep at 7:30 when I'm supposed to. Right? So that is like the first and foremost thing. But I wanted to expound upon the nurturing aspect and just thinking about my story, not anybody else's story. But when I was younger, I'm not going to say the word forced, but it was made imperative to me that I be responsible for my sister, my younger sister, 4 years younger. And so the nourishment for myself was non-existent because it wasn't my existence that mattered. Because if she wasn't happy or if she was unhappy in specifics, that had impacts for me. Then you move into, I've already shared that I've never been entirely on my own. So then you move into a relationship with someone else, and that just migrates into they must be happy, you must take care of them. So all that nurturing just shifted from my sibling to my spouse. Then you have children. Some people don't, but I had children. And then that nurturing moved on to them. And my whole life has been frustrated with, when is it time for me? Well, now that it's finally becoming time for me, I'm not sure what to do with myself in that regard. I mean, I'm not a person who revels in bubble baths. That's not a thing that appeals to me. It appeals to people, but it doesn't appeal to me. I'm not a person who, wants to go out for facials or do the things that people think are pampering, because that's never been a thing for me. I might like it. I don't know, but that's not something that appeals to me to even, try out. Maybe I should, just to see if it does.
And I think we create Brenda a post-retirement self-care challenge. Like she's just got to dabble in a little bit of everything just to see, I would be totally with you to say like, no, I'm not getting in that ocean. And then hands down, y'all are going to get me in that ocean. And I'll be like, oh, look what I've missed my whole life.
I
Half
think
the
I'm
world.
so used to it, right? We get
Half
so
the
used
world,
to like the
Kristie.
story.
I'm gonna start creating lists of ideas, Brenda. I'm just gonna like give it to
All
you
right.
like a bingo card. Like you just gotta taste it. Just taste test.
I love
Play
it.
with.
You know, those
I'm sorry
things
to
are,
interrupt you.
no. It's, but I'll even go to the extent, I mean, I'm serious, have been a serious workaholic. So coming off of that, and for me, it's been gradual. 2 years ago, I was working 80 hours a week and thriving because that was my thing.
But were you?
And the nourishment I perceived out of that was financial security.
Yeah.
It's twisted, but that's
Yeah,
what I
no,
saw
but it
as,
is.
because it was caring for the family and caring for our future. It was a caring, and I gladly did it, even though it was frustrating and I didn't want to do it, but I gladly did it because there was an outcome that I saw at the end.
Would you
But
say?
then
Would you think sacrifice would be
always
like
sacrificed
you
myself.
sacrificed yourself in order to
Always.
provide? Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's where
And-
the disconnect is, because we think that we're nourishing, that we're sacrificing for this future opportunity. But if we don't have that in the present, it's like Abraham says, you know, you can't, what is it? You can't have a happy ending if you haven't had a happy journey. So if we're not nourishing ourselves in the here and now, and we're sacrificing for the future, thinking that we'll be nourished then, that is the illusion, right? That is the addiction we fall into.
It's like you can't get to nourishment through deprivation, right? Like the
But that's not what society praises.
I was going to say, but
no.
that's what we're sold, right? That is 100% what we're sold.
Yeah.
And conditioned to be and expected to be, and taking that step back, and it's like, oh, this is great for you. So what are you going to do then?
Yeah,
And that's what I keep getting asked. So what are you going to do? I'm like,
nothing.
Isn't that so interesting? That's the first instinctive question. You know,
so then
like,
what?
what are you going
So
to
then what?
fill your time with then? Like, just breathing
I
isn't
already
enough.
No, because it's not, right? I mean, it's just, there's a lot of mental things going on right now about should, you know, what you should be doing or should be considering, or all those things. And I'm trying my hardest to ignore those things, not ignore them, but consider them and going, are they really shoulds?
Mm.
Is it really something that lights me up, or is it just a should and it's going to turn into just like what I've been experiencing, where it's just more for something, or I'm not going to say someone else, but something else that's not something that lights me up. And that's what I'm looking forward to, is figuring out what lights me up.
Read,
I'm excited to watch you.
yeah, I read in a book about money and work is just the adult version of grades. It's
Mhm.
like
Absolutely.
we, earning our worth, love as children, as grades. I think all of us here might have been something for us, right? And then we just move it in adulthood to working and
For
money.
sure.
And what was the other thing I wanted to tell you, Brenda?
I'll even take it one step further. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, everything, someone once told me, anything that follows a should is a damn lie. So like, it's like, we're so conditioned, right? That's the mean part of our brain, I think, that, or the protective part, whatever we want to call it, right? There's no mean part of our brain, but like, that's what kept us. It was very helpful for us to get to where we are, right?
And I'll take it one step further and say the work and the money was an easy way to hide everything else.
Oh, 100%.
Of course.
Right. And you don't have to deal because you're too busy to deal with anything else. And people will just part the waters for you when you just are on, I'm on this mission. I have to do this work. I have to, I don't get in my way, and we'll deal with everything else later. And you never do, because you're on this aimed focus, and no nourishment of any kind is happening, even though you believe you're doing the best thing.
You know what I
said,
think
like, I've
is,
never done, go ahead, Kristie.
you're good.
I was going to say, I've never done drugs, but I'm sure it's probably like drugs, like that dopamine, that like feel good about yourself and the money, like that high. It's such a mind fuck or whatever you want to call it, right? Like it just keeps you going and going and going because the reward is falsely feels so good.
For sure.
Be prepared for withdrawals.
I know, right?
Big ones.
That's for sure. I was just thinking, I think my train has left the station too. I'm like, hold on. I wrote down notes because of like things that I'm trying not to interrupt everybody, because you know how my brain likes to just interject so promptly. I was just thinking when Brenda was talking about like you're busy and that kind of becomes like the buffer, right? Like the way to not deal with. And
Yeah,
it's like
it is.
everybody, Brenda, we lost your video. Do you know that?
Yeah, because I was
Okay.
letting the dogs out.
Oh,
and
you're
didn't
good. I
wanna
just wanted to make
have
sure
you
you
see me
knew.
standing up to do
You're
that.
good. I just feel like it's the norm. And what
It's
I have
expected.
experienced, and I feel like I'm on like the tail end of this experience, and you all know this, like I'm still like, you know, knee deep in my own BS of workaholism. When you do start to implement the rest, people would look at me and say, what's wrong? And it's like, nothing is wrong. This is actually what my body needs. Like, I'm not sick. I'm not choosing to sit down because I can't physically get up. I'm choosing to sit down because it's like what my body wants right now. I'm giving it permission to rest, to be still, whatever. And it's like, even my children will say to me, are you okay? It's like their instinctive response is like, something's wrong if we're not busy.
Absolutely.
Like what a interesting perspective. It's like society has even trained our children already.
The last 3 years, the more I go through this, the more I get in touch with my emotions, and the more I find myself crying. Like I have now identified that love shows up in my body as tears, oftentimes as tears.
Interesting.
So like when I get my sensations deeply in alignment with the cocktail that appears within my body that I identify with love, like if I think about love and nourishment, like feeling held and fulfilled, like deeply, those sensations in my body produce feelings of like warmth, and usually there's always liquid accompanying that. And the only difference, like visually, to those outside of me might be that my tears might come with a smile, or like me with my hand on my heart, versus before I would cry and it was because I was sad or upset, right? So for the longest time, my husband, what's wrong? Like, because for him, tears are a sign that either something has gone wrong, which could likely be his fault, or he's thinking like, what did I do? What did I say? What happened to you?
How can I fix it?
Exactly. So for the longest time, that my environment met me with what is wrong. And as I was making that transition into recognizing, no, I'm like, right now I'm just expressing like deep love and gratitude and connection, or feeling like I'm being held. It took a while for my environment to then shift, and instead of people saying what's wrong, it was like, oh, what are you feeling? And most of that started with me then having to say, nothing's wrong. I'm feeling love, or I'm feeling gratitude. And so now when I cry, my husband still has a little bit of that trigger, but it's getting better. Right.
I want to offer too that one of my non-nourishing I've like transitioned, and I think you all have really assisted me in this, is receiving gifts, receiving love, receiving compliments, without that instinctive like
Rejection.
rejection, or feeling like I need to reciprocate.
Isn't that just like the picture of the reflection? David and I were just having a long conversation before we met with everybody today, and it was around this, like, learning how to communicate with each other, how do we nourish each other now, and how do we receive that? Receiving is usually, I think it's probably one of the hardest pieces for people to accept, right? It's that receiving. Like, we can say, I want this. And oftentimes, like, we're over giving because what are we afraid of? Being rejected. But yet, when it comes to receiving that, what are we doing? We're rejecting it.
Yeah. I feel like I compliment my husband all of the time to you all. And Erin, I feel like you always do such a great job of highlighting his willingness to love me. But I remember very vividly, like, almost giving him a script, right? Like, I just need you to keep saying these things to me. And he would do it because he's awesome. And then I would somehow feel like that wasn't enough, right? Like, it was just such, seriously, I'm like, why is this man still with me? Sometimes, like, in retrospect, I'm grateful, incredibly grateful for him. But, like, how many times do you offer something and somebody rejects it, and then you just keep offering it, right? Like, I'm like, the most genuine love there.
And there's two sides of that, right? Like, when we reject that from that person, we also don't allow that person to have that experience of the other side. I remember when
Right.
Grayson wanted to buy a friend of hers just this little, like, rose quartz in the store, and the mom was like, no. So what she also didn't allow Grayson to experience was the giving, right? So it wasn't just her child didn't get to have it because for whatever reason she didn't want it. Grayson didn't get to experience that giving part of it. And so it's not just us rejecting, it's the other person wanting to give, that they don't get to experience that too, I think.
Through that, the coping styles course that I went through, one of the practices, the embodiment practices, is to literally drink cold water and, like, feel it go into your body and let it pull into your stomach. And it brought so much attention to me and how transactional food and liquid can be. And I lean more towards warmth than I do cold. And so the cold, I was just like, yeah, I feel it. But then I recently have just been drinking hot water instead of coffee. And oh my gosh, like, my whole body warms up, and, like, I feel it filling my stomach. And I just think that's such an interesting practice of, like, awareness and, like, receiving. It's something just so simple, right? It's just like a cup of cold or warm water. But it's just really, like, my awareness to receiving that food and the liquid. It's just a great practice, for me to just feel it in my body every single day and, like, feel it as a symbol of gratitude. It's been the thing, again, that I feel like you all have allowed me to practice, to just receive and not feel like I need to, like, show up, right? I don't need to do anything to,
And I just want to highlight that this is so normal for us as humans, especially, like, when we've been like, I don't want this. Oftentimes what happens is we're going to swing way over on the other end of the pendulum, and we're going to explore and play with that aspect. Oh, I want this, I want this, I want this, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that. And so that swing, what we're looking to find is a harmony, the place in the middle where we are both giving and receiving with ease and flow.
Yeah.
And being able to swing through that pendulum in how we react or respond to various different stimulus to our senses. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to start out with like, just have an awareness of what all of your senses are giving you and what is your perception of that right now. Because this is part of what we need to do as humans. We need to play. We need to feel at liberty, free to play with whatever end of the spectrum we're at right now. And how do we find harmony? It's like being on a teeter-totter. The joy of the teeter-totter is, oh, I'm really up, I'm really down, I'm really up, I'm really down. And that moment of balance that we find in between, but we can't find that if we're not playing with the don't wants and the wants, like what I want to pull myself towards and what I want to push myself away from. It's all that giving and receiving and how we find harmony in that nourishment.
Yeah, so good.
And it's all about the play with it.
On along the journey, right?
Yep. And in the essence of time, I think we have to wrap it up.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm excited to create a bingo card for Brenda.
Yes.
Think of some
I'll
things.
willingly accept a bingo card of a different sort for me, but
Yeah, we might need to, might be fun to create one for David. Yeah, he's going through the whole retirement adjustment thing as well. So
we could have a male version and a female version, I guess, right? Maybe gender neutral.
Yeah.
Of course, mine always goes to probably things that are more like female driven, but I don't know. Men could also like this too.
Well, I think also too, we're just so used to like, you know, saying that that's not like Brenda. I think Brenda and I feel like I'm so similar with all of you, but like, you know, with Brenda, it's like, that's what we're used to saying. Right. But like my daughter is like queen of fashion and high, all the things. But I will say, I'm like, like maybe I do want a face mask. Like I've always been like, that's not for me, that I don't want those things. And I'm like, that I'm open to it, you know, like I think we get so used to like, that's not who I am. That's not what I want, but maybe so.
And sometimes you just don't know it until you try it.
Yeah.
And so
Erin's going to play the bingo card with me.
I'm like, we'll
we need Grayson to make the bingo card. Heck with me. I'm out. Grayson can totally do that.
Just playing with all different kinds of things and knowing that, you know, like the person that we are, fundamentally, we are always that same true, authentic person. But the beliefs that we've had about ourselves are always in flux and evolution and change. And so, you know, the Erin that may have said, I'm not a face mask girl in the past, and may have even had tried it, is not the same Erin that sits here right now. Same thing with Brenda. Like maybe bubble baths aren't the thing.
I like luxury. I'm finding out I like luxury.
Yep.
All luxury. Okay. I know you girls got to go.
I got to go.
You all. Okay. Bye.
Till next time.
Okay. Bye.